Morning, everybody. We'll just give it a minute or two as we get ourselves started, but I would like to welcome you to this IoD Education Group webinar this morning. Thank you for joining so promptly. Hope you're having a great week. Lovely morning, actually, by the looks of it, in certainly my part of the country. But good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this morning. Hope everyone has been enjoying the last week and a half or so, as we have been experiencing our new government. In fact, new government, new manifesto, new Secretary of State for Education, new Skills Minister, and they certainly seem to have hit the ground running in many respects. So I can still see a few people arriving, so we'll just give it a minute or two as we kick off. But thank you very much for joining us this morning. So my name is Gareth John. I'm one of the co-leads of the Institute of Directors Education Group. And in fact, my fellow co-lead, Dean Stokes, is with us this morning, so he may pop in and out over the next hour or so. He's going to help me with the Q&A box, so do feel free. In fact, I would actively encourage you to use the Q&A box over the next 60 minutes. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add to the chat box, because we are going to be covering some specific, I think, big topics over the next hour. We're going to be looking at Skills England. We're going to be looking at the growth and skills levy. And we're going to be talking a bit about devolution. So actually, if you are posting questions into the Q&A box, it'd be quite useful for us just to filter them. If you maybe refer to which, is it topic 1, topic 2, topic 3, or is it AOB? We're quite happy if there's a few minutes at the end to see if we can actually address any other questions that the audience would be. So it'd be great if people would, put any of their thoughts or views on each of the given topics, any questions they've got for our brilliant panel this morning. So I'm, as I've said, one of the co-leads of the IoD's Education Group. In my day job, I'm a director of a business called First Intuition. We're a large national provider of apprenticeships in accountancy. So I spend an awful lot of my time talking to the DFE, to the ESFA. I don't know if any of you have come across their new iMod teams, iFate. I also spend a lot of time talking to policy leads, some of whom are on this call as our panel this morning, from the likes of the IoD. We've got Alex from the IoD, we've got the CBI, ALP, other. In fact, we've got to think the full set of the B5 largest membership organisations in the UK. And it's been a busy 36 hours, even let alone the last week and a half. We saw a sector speech by Bridget Phillipson a couple of days ago, and then yesterday the King's speech. So the question I've got is, do we actually know any more from the last 36 hours, or is it just confirmation of what was already laid out in the manifesto? Have we had much in the way of clarification, or are we still waiting for a lot of the detail? Do we still have a lot of unanswered questions? And I'm going to ask our panel to now introduce themselves. Firstly, who they are, who are they representing, what kind of members are they speaking on behalf of, but also I'd be interested to hear what there may be top 1 or 2 opportunities for the government, questions that they still think need to be answered, priorities that we need to see over the coming months. So if we can do a bit of a round the table introduction from our panelists, that would be fantastic. And given it's an IoD Education Group webinar, I thought I might come to Alex from the IoD to start with.
Thanks very much, Gareth. So hi everyone, I'm Alex Hall-Chen. I lead on skills policy at the IoD. For anyone who's not familiar with us, we're an organisation representing around 20,000 directors and senior business leaders, predominantly from SMEs. So I thought I'd just start by giving a very quick sense of the scale of the problem from the employer perspective. So every quarter, we poll IoD members on what factors are negatively affecting their businesses. And in May this year, 45% cited skills and labour shortages as having a negative impact on their organisation. And that's only behind UK macroeconomic conditions. So it's above other things like bureaucracy, cost of energy, and it's been really consistently high for a very long time, as long as we've been running that survey, really. So from what we can see, these are structural issues, and it really needs to be central to the UK's industrial strategy. We're very pleased that there will be an industrial strategy, but what we're really pushing for is for skills to be at the heart of that, and for the skills policy to be really laser focused on tackling those skill shortages that we know are across the economy. And that really needs an understanding of what's inhibiting employer investment in skills and unblocking that.
Alex, fantastic. Actually, you've already raised, we've seen this explicit link between skills policy and national industrial policy. And in fact, there's also a strong connection already with immigration policy. So those three things really connected together, which I think is interesting, and we may well dissect over the next hour or so. So thank you very much, Alex. I wonder if I can now come to Robert.
Hi, everyone. I'm Robert West. I'm the head of education and skills at the CBI. For those of you who don't know, this is a business representation organization giving voice to around 170,000 businesses of all sizes, some very well-known names to some very small organizations based probably in your own locality, because we tend to cover all parts of the UK, England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. We also work with trade associations and a whole range of sectors, from construction to even zoology at one point as well. We also uniquely in our membership have FE members, HE members and independent training providers. So we feel we can give quite a range of voices and opinions on some of these matters. Look, we just know all around us, don't we, that the world of work has been changing and it continues to change. So tech adoption drives a lot of that. We know that things like net zero is another one. I think the latest figure I heard was something like 3 million people needing to reskill for a new occupation by 2030. So upskilling and retraining are the biggest games in town for us. And in terms of top issues for the government, I think there's one about how do you build confidence in a skills system and how do you do that through greater collaboration. Skills England is certainly one step along that way. We said within our own business manifesto we issued in November that in fact you need to go a bit further than that. What about a UK independent skills commission? So how does Skills England become wide enough to have a genuine impact in relation to industrial strategy? How independent will Skills England be, or will we continue to see this top-down approach, which I think has held us back? And the second one, of course, is we're very pleased to see finally some reform of the apprenticeship levy, but what will meaningful flexibility into a growth and skills levy look like? There's a great opportunity here to address lifelong learning, in terms of things like upskilling and retraining. But I did notice yesterday there was nothing mentioned about lifelong learning in the King's speech.
Thank you, Robert. Actually, you've already raised a word I was hoping we would have a bit of discussion of later, particularly in topic 2, looking at the growth and skills levy flexibilities. What does that actually mean? Because that can mean all sorts of different things. But thank you, Robert. Jane, can I come to you now?
Yeah, good morning all. So I'm Jane Grattan. I'm Deputy Director of Policy at the British Chambers of Commerce. We represent 52 chambers of commerce across the UK and the tens of thousands of businesses they serve. And these are of all sizes and all sectors, but predominantly SMEs. So our priorities for the new government, as Alex was saying earlier, we find in 3/4 of our members can't recruit the people that they need with the right skills. There's a skills mismatch. And so what we basically need is better planning for skills, planning nationally, planning locally and within the combined authority areas and in local areas across the country, and also planning better at an individual firm level. So you may know we've been running as Chambers 32 of the 38 local skills improvement plans across the country. These are making a difference already. What we want to see is sort of long-term funding for these, building these local skills plans into the skills system so that they're baked in. And we've got to do this basically. We've got to plan better to help businesses invest more.
Fantastic, thank you, Jane. And you mentioned there the local skills improvement plans. I was actually involved to a degree with the Cambridge Chambers LSIP a year or so ago, and be interested to see how they evolve into these local growth plans that are referenced in the King's speech. And you talked there about that kind of planning nationally and planning locally, and yeah, it'd be interesting to sort of talk later on when we look at topic 3 on devolution, which I'm sure you'll have some very good opinions on around. Is there a tension there between national and local? But thank you very much, Jane. So I'd like to actually, because we've also got the FSB. So actually, Paul, what about your thoughts from the smaller employer perspective?
Well, good morning, everyone. So I'm Paul Wilson. I'm the Policy Director at FSB, the Federation of Small Businesses, and we aim to provide a voice for the 5.5 million small businesses and self-employed people within the country, who in turn employ 16.7 million people. It's a massive part of the economy, and it needs to be a massive part of the policy conversation. So I guess there's loads of interesting questions for the new government on skills, and I think one that we're particularly interested in is how can we boost the number of apprenticeships in non-levy paying employers? There's a lot of talk about reform of the levy, but what about non-levy payers? How can we get more of them to take on apprenticeships, and those that do take on apprentices to take on more? Secondly, I think there's a really interesting point around how can the government marry up skills policy with labour market policy, with immigration policy. I'm sure we'll talk about that in the context of Skills England, and I think that's something that all of our organisations have said in the past needs to happen. So there's a great opportunity there. And lastly, let's not forget the self-employed in the skills debate. It's not all about employers or employees. We have 4 million self-employed individuals. So how can we make sure skills policy works for them?
Brilliant. Some great perspective there, Paul, already. I think that thing around non-levy payers, going back to Robert's point about flexibilities of the use of levy funding, will that potentially endanger the amount of funds available for non-levy employers? So we'll perhaps dissect that a little bit later on. So thank you, Paul. So we've got some brilliant groups that kind of cross various sectors of different organisations, but there are some specific sectors that I think would be useful to hear from. And Faye, from your perspective, manufacturing sector.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name's Faye Skelton. I'm Head of Policy at Make UK. Make UK represents 20,000 manufacturers across England and Wales, of all sizes, but again, predominantly SMEs. Almost looking as an opportunity, hearing in the King's speech yesterday that the government is going to reform the apprenticeship levy is music to not only Make UK's, but I'm sure everyone's ears. That's been something that many of us have been pushing as a whole. So it's great that there's a commitment to do that, but really there needs to be having a wholesale look at the skills landscape, to look at really what works, what doesn't work, and really how we supporting employer investor in skills at all levels, because we know there is a chronic underfunding, particularly at provider level. That means that many FE providers just choose not to put on certain expensive apprenticeships, which often do fall in the manufacturing space. So yeah, lots of opportunity, but as we've already mentioned, lots of detail that still needs to come.
Fantastic, thank you, Faye. And as I said, I suspect this will be the first of a number of kind of conversations over the coming months and years. I mean, I guess one of the questions around a national industrial strategy and a related skill strategies, how long ahead is strategy looking? We're looking 2, 3, 5, 10 years. How many parliaments might that cover? So thank you very much, Faye. So we've got a variety of sort of employer groups, but actually delighted we're also joined by Simon, coming as much from a sort of provider group. They talked there about commerciality with providers. So Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. Morning, everyone. I'm Simon Ashworth. I'm Deputy CEO and Director of Policy at the Association of Employment Learning Providers, AELP. As Gareth mentioned, we're a representative body. We've got about 800 members, predominantly independent training providers, but we've also got a number of colleges, universities, employers in membership. A great fact I saw the other day is that our members work with about 300,000 employers. A little known fact sometimes that 2/3 of apprenticeships are delivered by independent training providers. So it's something that we're very passionate about. I guess I'll kind of start, Gareth, with the phrase that's going around at the moment: no time to waste, but no money to spend. Obviously, Labour have got a massive majority, but they've got quite a narrow majority. So pace is really important. Some of the things we're going to talk about today: reforming the levy, Skills England, Tier 1 priorities that Labour want to move quickly on. I guess for us, our sort of key message is the system isn't broken. The apprenticeship levy has been transformative for skills. It's doubled the amount of investment But we kind of need to build on the foundations that we've got. I think there's some operational challenges around some of the rules, some of the flexibility, some of the operational things like functional skills, off the job. We need to get more young people involved in apprenticeships. And as kind of colleague said from the FSB, we've got a bit of a hiatus of SMEs and apprenticeships. So how do we build on what we've got, thinking about some principles around sustainability, commonality, simplicity, and ultimately deliverability for providers as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Simon. Yeah, and I think that point around no time to waste, but no money to spend. I spent a bit of time yesterday with some people who are involved in the construction sector, and they were quite pleased with some of the stuff that's already come out around loosening up planning and pushing that forward. But I think it's quite evident that the policies there don't require a huge amount of government spending. It's about loosening up the planning side of things so that people can actually build houses and start construction, but without the government having to put a huge amount of money into it. So perhaps that's an early recognition that the bank account's a little bit thin at the moment. Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for their introductions. Already got some great discussions already emerging, which is fantastic. So we're now going to spend the rest of the webinar basically covering three major topics, hopefully, that we've already kind of heard about, which is, well, we saw yesterday, we did see the King's speech, the first King's speech under the new Labour government. A lot of emphasis there on economic growth, which I think we've already seen the Labour Party themselves seems to be the top of their 5 missions as a priority at the moment, but also around economic stability. I think was there about 40 bills mentioned in the King's speech, which is more than we would probably typically expect, including the Skills England bill, which has the reference to the Growth and Skills Levy, and then the English Devolution Bill, which, although it's wider, does reference specifically skills and employment support and kind of local growth plans, such as the one, like James has already mentioned. So I'd like us to move, and again, I've posted into the chat box, so if the audience have specific topics, and we have a fantastic panel today, but we've got an equally fantastic audience. I'm just scanning down the names in the audience, and we've actually got some pretty big hitters in the audience alone. So I'm hoping we'll get some great contribution and questions coming out of the audience. But we're going to look at our first topic now, which is Skills England. And actually, we were going to have another panelist this morning. We were supposed to be joined by Rob Nitch from iFate, basically second in command of iFate. But I had an email from Rob 2 days ago to say it would probably not be appropriate for him to speak on this webinar for reasons that maybe became clear in the King's speech yesterday, because looks like there's going to be significant transfer of functions from iFate to the new Skills England, which will then exist to support this economic growth priority. So I'm going to start by just throwing open a kind of very, very general question of what are we hoping that this new Skills England will bring to the skills system? So Alex, can I come to you first on that one?
Sure, thanks very much. I mean, I think from our perspective, the first thing to say is that we were really pleased when Skills England was announced. We felt for some time that there's been a kind of missing piece of the policy armoury in this space, in that there was kind of a need for a more kind of independent, technocratic body that builds up a sense of what the current and future skills needs for the UK are. So at its core, what we're sort of hoping to see is that Skills England does exactly that. It produces that analysis so that we won't be, for example, blindsided like we were with sudden skill shortages of, HGV drivers. That's the kind of situation really that employers will want to see avoided in future. I think the key question is what's government going to do with that information? We already know that it will feed into the courses which are approved for levy payers to spend some of their levy funds on. I think that's a really positive start. But as has been alluded to already, there's some slight concern about what this means for skills investment in SMEs. So, how can the insights from Skills England be used to directly support SMEs to invest more? So, when we've been advocating for a body like this previously, we've been asking for there to be a link between those insights on current and future skills needs and the tax system, so that employers who, for example, invest in training in shortage skills areas are, rewarded and incentivized through the tax system to do so. And that kind of system could encompass all employers. So to summarize, I think it's a great start. But the key question is, what are they going to do with that information for the benefit of all employers?
Thank you, Alex. Robert, can I bring you in at this point around what you're hoping that Skills England will bring?
Yes, thanks. A few people on this call we've been involved in some discussions we've been having with our members around how you improve adult skills. And one of the big themes that came up there is how do you improve strategic workforce planning? We all need to plan for the future. One of the things that holds people back from doing that is we haven't got a particularly stable policy framework. So you would hope one of the things Skill England would do was give us that chance and give businesses confidence that you've got a very simple, a very clear to understand skills policy and skills system that means people can engage with that. Alex mentioned to talk about what the skills for the UK are, and as I said, that's one of the issues to do with it. Well, what's the remit of Skills England? Will it go far enough? I think it makes absolute sense that Skills England kind of follows on from the industrial strategy, and then we're talking about the levy later. The levy comes out of the idea of Skills England, but who are Skills England? What's going to be involved in that? It's spun off an original idea from the Council of Skills Advisors for the Labour Party, where they were talking about a national skills task force. So is this a national skills task force? I think is one of the things. So who are they? Who's involved? IFATE you've already mentioned, who've lost a fair number of staff already because the DfE made them make cuts to that. So that's a small organisation. What's part of the remit and what's not? What's the role of the unit for future skills within all this as well? Because again, those council skills advisors were talking about reforming unit for future skills. So there's a lot of questions still around it, and a lot of clarification needs to happen. But what I do hope is that Skills England would provide some of that stability to policy. So we'll get a clear direction, and we'll then be able to feel confident that we've got a skills system that's going to address some of these challenges.
Brilliant. Thank you, Robert. And yeah, as you say, I mean, my understanding is that the unit for future skills may well be subsumed into Skills England, possibly even the Office for Students. I was reading, although again, this is, I guess, quite a lot of speculation at the moment around some of these areas, Robert, but thank you very much for that. I was just having a look in the Q&A box at this stage, and actually there is a kind of question/comment from Joe Giles around, I'm interested to see how the IFATE integration into Skills England will work. Then there's a sort of second question around review of funding bands, which we'll come to in 10 or 50 minutes when we look at the levy. But any thoughts around that IFATE integration into Skills England from anybody?
I'll chip in, Gareth, if that's okay.
Please do.
We've done quite a lot of work with Labour on Skills England since last year. I mean, our sort of four asks were lead on a national skills strategy, and obviously we've got this post-16 strategy that's come out. Work on, be the focus around thinking about cold spots on delivery, and we're of the understanding that the future skills unit of DfE will be subsumed within Skills England. We talked about Skills England setting the parameters for flexibility for the levy, and also kind of lead on evolution. I mean, our feeling on IFATE has always been IFATE's scope has become too bloated. They were set up originally around the Institute for Apprenticeships, and now they currently look after HTQs, level 2, level 3 qualifications, funding and assessment. So our sort of view, I guess, to some extent, was IFATE's lost its way. I mean, the announcement yesterday talked about transfer of functions. Some people have sort of read that as IFATE will be wound down. I think that is a possibility, but we'll have a slimmed down IFATE to just as a minimum, I would have thought. But our sort of view really was that IFATE should be the corollary of employers looking at the standards themselves. But certainly Skills England, as I say, it won't just consume bits of IFATE. It will certainly consume bits of DfE, and as you say, Gareth, maybe bits of OFS. All I'd kind of add on this really was that Skills England's not going to happen overnight. It's going to require legislation. It's a big Labour priority. So interim arrangements. But I guess there are some concerns about the operational side of IFATE and maintaining funding bands and approving standards in the interim as obviously go through waves of redundancy, and people might kind of look to move on. So the Labour want to move forward in terms of Skills England and that agenda, but we also need to make sure that the operational side of IFATE around deliverability is maintained in the short to medium term too.
Thank you, Simon. Jane, I could see you nodding along with Simon and with Robert, actually. Do you have any points to add here, do you think?
It was really that point about going back to Robert's point about stability, and then Simon's point about the interim period. And it's, how do we've announced that these changes are coming, and we know for business the worst thing is instability. So how do we, in the meantime, keep businesses investing in apprenticeships, keep businesses investing in training, whilst we shape this new system going forward?
Yeah, and I look back at 2023, and keeping my eye on the likes of FE Week and FE News, it seemed almost on a weekly basis there was another provider going out of business or shutting down provision or reducing apprenticeships. And it's like an ongoing train wreck, really, within provision, particularly around apprenticeships, which I'm involved in. And it seems like the sector is getting to a real crisis point and needs urgent support, urgent attention. And I think it's fair to say that there's been criticism of some of the regulatory processes in terms of, are they actually quick enough to keep pace with what's a very dynamic labour market and skills sector? At the best of times, let alone when you're losing 10% of headcount from IFE, and then we're going to have a transition across to Skills England. And I saw some costings for Skills England that seem to suggest it'll take 2 or 3 years before they get up to full operational capacity. Another general question to the group, actually. Will Skills England be able to become operational fast enough to resolve what seems to be kind of real, clear and present issues at the moment?
I think there'll be some interim arrangements, Gareth. Not in terms of the legislation, the formality. As I said, sort of Skills England is one of Labour's tier 1 priorities, so they want to make progress in the first 100 days. So, like I say, those interim arrangements will start to build on the policy before the kind of formality of the structure of Skills England might come in. As I was saying yesterday, I think our legislative approach over in our country is not particularly quick. So the formality of Skills England might take a bit longer, but there's definitely a lot of work. It really sort of reminds me of the work that happened with Bayes on things like the Trailblazers back in sort of pre reforms of 2017. So there'll be a lot of work happening behind the scenes. Like I say, we're expected to interim arrangements that sit kind of behind a sort of formal Skills England development.
And just to add to Simon, actually, the sort of strapline of this new government is economic growth, and skills clearly sit front and foremost of that. And so if there are particular aspects like funding bans, which I mentioned a few times, are holding back particular sectors like manufacturing, we would hope, and we're certainly going to be pushing the new government to be looking at that as a sort of a day 1 priority.
You would hope that the thing with Skills England is that's the gubbins that's going to make everything work. They're the wires that need to be hidden somewhere along the line. So again, the issue is, how do we still give businesses confidence in the skills system as it transfers to that? Most businesses won't care about Skills England. They don't care about but they want to know, what is it that's going to happen in terms of skills that's going to drive me forward. So I think allowing it to take its shape and take its time, if it needs that time, is fine, but we shouldn't allow the creation of Skills England to stop us simplifying the skills system and making it easier for people to use.
I think there's a interesting point there that occurred to me is, will Skills England be predominantly for coordinating the activities of the other regulators who apparently don't tend to talk to each other all that often, or will they interacting directly with employers, directly with providers? Paul, got any thoughts on this section?
Well, there's a huge need, I think, for better joining up, as I said at the start, and that's true across government departments, but also the agencies that sit beneath it. My one reflection on how quickly can Skills England get going is, there is a lot of talent already there in the Future Skills Unit. There is a lot of knowledgeable and talented people in IFE. Surely, the government will be making use of them as they formally set up this new organisation. So like others say, we don't lose momentum and employers continue to commit, because skills is such a vitally important area.
Fantastic. I'd like to see if we can bring in a bit of audience questioning here. So I've seen a question from Chris Lane. looking at, although skills policy is a devolved issue, is there a need for more joined up thinking across the UK on skills to deliver economic growth government is looking for? I guess that piece around increased alignment is, linked into Skills England.
It's the holy grail, isn't it? But whether it's achievable, obviously, Skills England have a role, I think, around devolution. Talk of a framework that's going to be put together. So yeah, I just think that's a real sort of challenge of Skills England England, isn't it? I think it's quite aspirational to a joint across the home nations. My only other comment on Skills England, sorry to sort of hog this one, is that I hope it's not sort of shuffling of the deck chairs. And we've got to learn from some of the challenges within IFATE, haven't we, about kind of loading too much into one area and hoping it becomes all encompassing. And the other term that we sort of heard used around Skills England is that it's intended to be a convener. So kind of going back to that point you're mentioning about I think Robert mentioned about the glue that holds the sort of system together.
Yeah, and that convening side, in fact, you referenced this earlier, Simon, around the role of, and from my perspective, very selfishly, I'm an independent training provider, and that sector often gets slightly overlooked when they're talking about schools, colleges, and universities. And the mention so far does, they talk about providers once or twice, but I'll be very interested in, even who's going to lead Skills England, what their background will be, and to what extent they're going to bring together. As you said, independent training providers do deliver 70% of apprenticeships at the moment, so making sure that the appropriate voices are reflected in that conversation. Well, the other thing that was contained in the Skills England bill was then reference to the growth and skills levy, which I've kind of already talked about a little bit, so I thought it might be a good opportunity to move through to talk about that. And again, I'm going to throw open a very broad question to kick off with, which is, and as Robert even mentioned earlier, there's much talk about flexibilities in the way that the levy, will operate under this new version. What do we hope that those flexibilities might look like? Jane, could I come to you to kick us off with a discussion here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the key thing, isn't it, is to get more businesses providing more training for more people. So how do we do that? Does the levy enable that to happen? So when we've spoken to businesses, they've said, well, for pre-apprenticeship training, more modular, flexible learning for adult upskilling and retraining. But it's how do you make sure that all the courses actually fit into some sort of coherent strategy? So you ensure you're adding value for individuals and the emerging needs for economies and emerging needs for business. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on actually what this is going to mean. But I think crucially in all of it, if we can simplify processes for businesses during this reform, it would be enormously helpful. Yeah,
and there's that that piece around the funding of apprenticeships, or other training, and I might come to Faye in a second because she's already sort of referenced funding bans. Because even the Conservative manifesto pre-election was talking about 100,000 new apprenticeships, and this money that was going to go into the apprenticeship budget. My view is it doesn't matter how much you put into the apprenticeship budget if individual funding bans are inadequate for commercial provision. The analogy I use is like building more planes where nobody can afford the seats on the planes. You've got to make sure that the seats are affordable. But Faye, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this around the new growth and skills levy.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually because in the King's speech yesterday, that wasn't actually referenced, the growth and skills levy. It was just reforming the apprenticeship levy, which we were quite pleased with actually, because we have some reserves about expanding something that, at least for manufacturing engineering apprenticeships, isn't working particularly well. So there's been a drop of apprenticeship starts by 40% since the levy started to 2022, 2023. And particularly for level 3 manufacturing and engineering apprenticeships, there's a gap around £6,000 to £7,000 per apprentice per training provider, which essentially just means that the market is just going to react in the way that commercial markets react. They're going to start pulling out, which is a problem. We certainly there needs to be something fundamentally looking at the how you retrain and upskill, particularly as you look forward to more of a green economy, which we are completely agree. But I think there has to be a fundamental review into how the apprenticeship apprenticeship levy works. And actually, where is that unspent funds going? So we know that there is around 2 billion unspent funds since the levy started. That just goes back into the government coffers, which is great for the government, but less good for all the sectors that benefit. So I think for us, actually, flexibilities, more detail is needed, but actually our position is good quality apprenticeships rather than just a massive expansion of just apprenticeships for, you know, I'm just going to pick on one particular florist. If you really want to grow the economy, you have to look at what your particular sectors that are going to grow the economy. And that's sort of our main position.
Thanks, Faye. And you raise a brilliant point there around, I find it's sometimes it's what's not said is as much as what is said. You know, so for instance, I'm sure we'll all remember there was the 50% of levy could be used in these, you know, flexible training interventions, but that 50% wasn't in the manifesto. So, you know, quite interesting. Reminds me of if you've ever been in one of those escape rooms, and you know, if there's a picture on the wall of the Beatles, you know, the name of the fourth one will be code for something or other. It's almost working out what they're not saying as much as what they are saying. It's a really great point, actually. Simon, can I come to you for your thoughts on flexibilities in whether it's a reformed apprenticeship levy or the new growth and skills levy?
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. I mean, there wasn't much in the King's speech yesterday, probably because I mean, DfE already have the power to add non-apprenticeship programs to the apprenticeship service and don't need any special powers to do that. So I think any legislation change would either be optics, so change of the title from an apprenticeship levy to a growth and skills levy, which they might want to do, and the second thing might be to change the parameters about who pays and what pays. So, you know, very little on the apprenticeship levy yesterday. We talked about Skills England. Skills England's going to be quite key to define what some of these flexibilities look like. As you mentioned, I think we were really pleased that there was no mention of the 50% flexibility in the manifesto commitment. You know, 98% of the apprenticeship program budget's been spent over the last couple of years, so there's not much headroom within the current budget to have lots of flexibilities. Our flexibility is kind of put into two pots. So program flexibility, so how do we make the apprenticeship program more flexible, thinking about duration, what's included. There's obviously a review of scaling down endpoint assessment, but also keeping independence really important. So there's a bit around program flexibilities, and then I think our other sort of pot we'd say is sort of funding flexibility. So what else can it fund? You know, very much should advocate enhancing what we've got. So, you know, how to get more people in, sort of routes into apprenticeships been mentioned, modular upskilling. So I think kind of where we are at the moment, I don't think we'll see flexibilities. Like I said, we could have flexibilities tomorrow if someone wanted to flick the switch, but I expect this take a bit of time. Skills England are going to consult, or this sort of interim organisation, but I think how we're going to fund flexibilities is really important. I think there's going to be a renewed push on the Treasury to release some of that top slice that they keep, which might help us move to a tapered releasing of funding for flexibilities. Or it really kind of comes back to repurposing what we've got. You know, if we spend less on endpoint assessment, for example, that might be able to be spent on flexibilities. But as colleagues already mentioned, some of the apprenticeship programs are undeliverable based on their current funding rates. So we just got to be careful that you know, we're progressive around apprenticeships at the core, and we don't go backwards with some odd decisions. But I think we seem to be heading in the right direction around cautious approach, opening up rather than big bang wholesale change. So that's kind of where we are at the moment, and we'll see how we sort of progress as we head forward with the new Labour government.
Thank you, Simon. Actually, you know, you raised that point around you know, the amount of money being raised by the levy. So I've heard talk of whether the 0.5% might increase to 0.25% or 1%, whether the 3 million threshold would drop to bring more employers into the levy. But actually, my view is it doesn't matter how much the levy is raising. If you're only allocating but if you're only allocating a proportion of that to the actual apprenticeship budget, and you talked about the top slice, although, Simon, I'm pretty sure you've described it as a gaping chasm in the past. the amount sorry to
cash. I
you
think
know
I also
the
call it. I think we call it in the trade press a bit of a cash cow for the Treasury. I mean, OBR forecast is the levies on course to generate £4 billion. You know, the program budget's 2.7. A bit of money goes to the devolved nations. You know, the Treasury keeps 500 to 700 million or spends it on skills boot camps or whatever the narrative is. So even a bit of that would be nice, wouldn't it? So we'd all love that, and that's what we're trying to move forward on.
Absolutely. And actually, you mentioned also duration. I know my sector, apprenticeships and accountancy have actually been, well adopted, apart from at level 2, because the 12 months and a day gateway rule is just proving prohibitively long at that level. And do you need the same gateway from levels 2 to 7? So I think definitely flexibilities around duration would be beneficial. I mean, that 50% use of levy funds for more flexible training that was talked about an awful lot before the manifesto, but then was absent. I think there seemed to be a lot of pushback from sector voices around the impact that would then have on non-levy funding, because obviously if levy payers can use more of their funds, there's probably less left over. Might bring in Paul at that side. Are there concerns for the impact flexibilities would have for apprenticeship support for smaller employers?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely a risk, and I think it's something that we need to see some urgent clarification from the government on. Actually, there have been some really commendable efforts, I think, in the last couple of years to get more non-levy payers, more smaller employers being able to take on apprenticeships. And part of that is the government providing either a 95% or 100% contribution towards the training costs. And what we need to see is, certainty for small employers that actually will continue going forward, and it won't depend on what's left in the levy pot, which may or may not be being used for more flexible training provision by levy payers. We need an absolute commitment to apprenticeships in smaller employers from the Treasury, from the government, from DfE, and that's something that we were hoping to see yesterday around the King's speech. We haven't seen it yet, but we very much hope to see it too, and it is something that Labour spoke about in opposition. And the other thing I would say around apprenticeships is that we need to make sure that apprenticeship standards can work for small employers, even though small employers inherently will be less involved in their design because it's a labour intensive thing naturally. And I think this is something that IFE have done a lot of good thinking about. We need to carry on that thinking within the new administration. How do we make sure that we're getting standards that work for everyone, not just a relatively small number of organisations who are involved in designing them?
Thank you, Paul. Now, I'm keen to get a bit of audience involvement here, so I'm going to go kind of high risk here and try and bring in one of the audience, because I see Joe Giles has made quite a number of comments through the chat box and did have the hand up a little bit earlier. So I wonder, Joe, if you'd be, just interested in your reflections on what you've heard so far. Any questions you've specifically got for the panel?
Can you hear me okay?
Can do.
Morning, everybody. Yeah, it's really interesting, and sorry for being really noisy on the chat. I guess my view or my concern is that with the levy, or the levy that doesn't come directly into levy accounts, that will then form a part of the funding that comes into the devolved counties, and that there will be almost a replication of how SMEs are able to draw down funding through devolved states in a similar way that they do non-levy funds. So that's my concern. What I really hope is that devolved funds go directly to the local authority. The local skills improvement plans can help support and shape what is required in the county, because we do really have a strong voice with those employers. So that's my real concern about that. And secondly, just mentioning regarding the shaping of perhaps some redesigning of standards. I think all of the local skills improvement plans have probably got really strong sector groups that are made up primarily of SME employers. So that would be a great way to feed into the development or the redevelopment of new standards, hearing the voice of those SMEs through that route, because it's really important. I come from a independent training provider background, and what we hear so often is that standard doesn't quite meet my need, so we need to have some real flexibility in that. And lastly, I hope that Skills England works much more closely with the Department of Education, and I've put this in the chat. If we don't get information, advice and guidance right in schools, and that is funded in schools, we will continue to see a downturn in 16 to 18-year-old uptake of apprenticeships, because not all schools are meeting the Gatsby benchmarks, and not all schools are providing really rich information, advice and guidance for those young people. So they don't know what choices they have. They don't understand the apprenticeship provision that potentially is available to them and these really good careers that they could go into. That's my thoughts, Gareth.
Fabulous. No, Joe, thank you, and no need to apologise at all. You know, we love to hear the feedback and the input. In fact, you talked there about devolution, so teeing us up nicely for the last section that we'll come to in a minute.
But can I come in onto some of those things that Joe has said there? Because I think it's a good example of one of the issues that I think that's become a big problem with the apprenticeship levy is it tries to do too much. And I think one of the things that's happening here is we're talking about lots and lots of different things, and then there's this thing called the levy that sits over it. And I think there's an issue with that, really. The CBI's opposition to the apprenticeship levy has been based on a really simple principle that it was set up as being apprenticeships were set up as the solution, and not the solution to our skills need. They are a solution and part of a broader range. So there is things that we need to do, such as identify where exactly the levy take goes, and also remember each year more and more businesses cross that 3 million threshold and start to pay the levy, but the levy take has gone up disproportionately from the amount in the apprenticeship budget. So the apprenticeship levy has not been spent on apprenticeships. So we need to separate out some of these discussions. I think we need to look at what kind of apprenticeship system do we need? How do we address things like apprenticeship funding bands that don't go up with inflation and therefore put more pressure on providers and employers to do that? How do we deal with a non-apprenticeship training system like boot camps, like groups there? And it's almost like get a blank sheet of paper out and decide how are they best funded? Because I think one of the fundamental problems was apprenticeship levy just became a catch-all. Let's hope the growth and skills levy doesn't become just a catch-all for everything as well, but that we fund each element, each of those solutions in a proper way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rob. I've got a hand up from Emily, so I'm wondering if Emily wants to contribute or ask a question. If you unmute yourself, Emily, you should be able to.
I didn't have my hand up, actually, Gareth.
Ooh, apologies.
I don't know how I've meant to do that, but thank you.
No worries at all, Emily. Right. Well, actually, Joe did tee us up nicely, I think, as a good segue into our last section, just having a bit of a think about devolution. It does seem that the Labour Party are full steam ahead with devolution. In fact, even this change we've seen to Angela Rayner's job title to replace levelling up with local government does seem to be in that thread. So, well, we've already talked a bit about Skills England and the need for a kind of overarching post-16 education strategy, but is there a tension between further devolution of adult skills, possibly even to include, say, apprenticeships, and the creation of a body to see that national level? So, in fact, I think very well positioned to give us some insight into this is Jane.
Yeah, so the devolution of skills is a really good move, because local businesses, local partners know what's needed in their area. They know best how to direct the funding for most impact. So, you know, we businesses generally think the more that we can devolve skills funding and skills policy, the better. Having said that, we do need this industrial strategy. We need that underpinned by a national skills strategy through Skills England, and then sort of setting the economy requires more higher level technical skills. We know that's coming. So how do we balance the immediate needs of employers and the fantastic jobs that are being created now and the mismatch of skills that I talked about earlier, with getting businesses prepared and investing for these longer term skills needs? technical skills needs that we're going to have. So central to all of this, as I mentioned earlier, is the local skills improvement plan idea. This idea of bringing together employers, training providers, other partners, and saying, where are industry trends taking businesses now? How are skills needs evolving? Where are the opportunities we're creating now, medium, but particularly medium and longer term? And how do we align everything to that? So with that knowledge, then we can align the careers that with information and support that we've just talked about. We can align the funding, and all of this can be built into other strategies. So your employment support, your transport, your local economic strategies. So I think skills needs to sit central to all of those local economic plans, and devolving the funding and enabling authorities to pull together all the disparate pots of funding that there are for all different things into sort of a coherent, more flexible funding pot that can be used to target the skills interventions that are required when they're required in the places that are required for the most impact.
Thanks, Jane. I mean, I know from first-hand experience the massive efforts that the chain put into reaching, smaller employers in local areas, particularly employers who perhaps don't get their voices heard in other sort of skills policy initiatives. And actually, I thought Paul might even have a view on this from an SME perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's always a tension when it comes to devolution between the need to set priorities at a national level and the need to give flexibility locally. And I think it is absolutely a good thing to see more devolution of skills spending, but then there will be those who come out the wrong side of that as they see it and start talking about postcode lotteries. So I think the thing that you've got to avoid is setting too many constraints at a national level that results in it being too difficult or too complicated to actually spend the money effectively locally. You've got to be a little bit brave there, I would say. And one of the key tests for Skills England, and in fact the skills system going forward, is how well will they be able to work with employers of all sizes in order to make sure we have the training to get people work ready. Take something like AI, huge opportunity for the country, undoubtedly going to be part of what the government's thinking about in its industrial strategy. How do we ensure that those work ready skills in digital and AI are not just on the national curriculum, but then available to help people retrain going forward? And lastly, to pick up on something that Jane mentioned, which is absolutely right, LSIPs, we've delivered some, FSB have delivered some in some regions. Let's not lose the progress, because I know how much work and engagement have gone into these. They're really good. They're really important. Let's build on that, and let's not do that thing that is easy to do, but probably wrong, where you start a new government and you almost forget some of the good stuff that's been done previously. So we have that strong starting point.
Yeah, a lot of knowledge to build on, a lot of relationships to build on, I think, from the work that's been done with LSIPs. You make mention there, and I have heard that phrase postcode lottery a bit around devolution and potentially inconsistencies, in different parts of the country. And I know there's, perhaps larger employers, larger providers will see more to have concern over around those inconsistencies. I mean, is that a challenge, Robert? I saw you shaking your head. Nodding there.
I think it is a challenge. Of course, there should be, those decisions made at a local level. But as you say, there are some national organisations, and and people themselves don't stay just within one local area. So you need to be able to be flexible and move around. So I think there is a danger of things becoming a bit like the Wild West. I know Manchester are pushing ahead with their MBAC, a new qualification. So what's going to happen to business? You're doing an MBAC in Manchester, you're doing an LBAC in Liverpool, you're doing a different qualification here and there. So there does need to be this consistency. And back to my point I made right at the beginning, it just needs to be a simple system. It needs to be a clear system. The decisions need to be taken, of course, at the area where it happens. But postcode lottery is a real issue, I think, for organisations. And as I say, those who go across borders, and again, let me bring back the silence around how skills affect Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and the refusal to talk about the UK skills problems, I think is something that's going to have to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I deal with some larger employers that operate across multiple geographies and sometimes even national. And, the key thing they look for is consistency. They want consistency. If they're recruiting a cohort of trainees in different parts of the country, they want the same approach for all of them. And, the idea of having, different priorities, different amounts of funding, different eligibility requirements, I think will be quite off-putting for some of them. Alex, I might bring you in at this stage. You got any views on devolution?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Rob that it's definitely a risk. I mean, I think ultimately we need both. We need flexibility at the local level. We need a national picture. At the moment we do have national level policies to address skill shortages. They're just not based on as much sort of evidence and clear insight as I think there could be. Skills England's stated aim is to ensure that national and regional skill systems are both meeting skills needs and aligned. So at least on a sort of high level, I think that's a great place to start. The exact balance is going to be difficult, but it's important to at least attempt it. And I think a lot of this comes down to as well the need for there to be a kind of sort of root and branch assessment of the system as a whole. And I'm quite confident with the reforms to Skills England, to the levy, that is what this government is proposing. But that is also why, as we discussed earlier, this may take some time. But there really needs to be the sense of how the different parts of the skill system interact with each other. How can that be improved? We've mentioned careers. I think another thing to mention here is the lifelong learning entitlement, which is due to come into effect quite soon. How will that interact with the insights that are coming from Skills England? From the employer perspective, how are they going to be expected to build their skills plans? Their skills development plans around things like LLE, a reformed levy. So yeah, a plea, I guess, for this to all slot in together, and there really to be that sort of high level overview of the system.
Thank you, Alex. I'm going to go to the audience. I can see a hand up from Gareth, another Gareth on the call. So, Gareth, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, can you hear me, Gareth?
Can do.
Thank you, first of all. It's been a really interesting hour. I just wanted to, first of all, just build on what Robert was discussing with regard to not losing the great work we've put together from the LSIPs. I've worked with LSIPs, but also I've got a background in school, so I work a lot with large mats. It'd be really interesting to bring in some of the larger mats, particularly with the growth of mats now we're seeing. So multi-academy trusts I'm talking about there. So I think that there's a wider space for the LSIP to have a bigger impact from right through the education system. But my question was really, I'd be interested to hear the panel's comments around T levels, considering Gordon Brown and Lord Salisbury's points yesterday, just on, first of all, whether they think T levels are fit for purpose in their current form, but also whether the impact of losing BTECs is going to have a large and perhaps negative impact with less academic pupils and children, and therefore put them off what we're trying to do, which is build them into that skills sort of sector.
Well, Gareth, great question, although we have only got 3 minutes left, so probably going to struggle to give a very comprehensive answer, but I don't know whether Simon might have a quick view on this. I think this webinar has raised more questions than answers, so I think we're definitely going to have to return some of these discussions. But Simon,
I think our dealings with the kind of Labour government before they came in power is, I think they on things like T levels, they didn't seem to have a particularly clear view. Obviously brought in by the Tories. Tories then scrapped them or integrated them or whatever the sort of terminology they want to use. I think the trouble is it's too much of a sort of binary system. Obviously, we've got the campaign going at the moment, which ALP support around, a pause and review of defunding of level 3 and below. I mean, it's a bit of a no-brainer. We obviously had the sort of Lord Sainsbury and Gordon Brown interjection yesterday. So I'm not convinced Labour have got a view about the future on 16 to 19, whether it's ABS, T levels, BTECs. I think they'll be led a lot by officials, and officials obviously want to get rid of a lot of the applied general BTEC qualification. So I think that the future is uncertain, but I certainly see, we see a future which combines T levels in some instances, but also kind of applied generals and BTECs in others. I think we need a mixed economy for greater choice, works for learners of all opportunities in all instances.
Fantastic, thank you, Simon. Well, just as we're tailing off now, I'd actually like to give a big thank you to David from the IoD, and I know David just wants to say a few words, who's been supporting all of this and making all the tech work seamlessly. So, David?
Thank you very much, Gareth. I hope everyone can hear me. Just coming off the IoD icon. So nice to hear from everyone. Thanks to all the speakers, Gareth as well for hosting. Very interesting discussion, and for those who attended and for asking all these questions. So as Gareth mentioned, there are so many questions here. If there are further questions just in the last minute or so, and you want to ping them into the Q&A chat, we're going to make a note of all of these, and we'll do our best to come back to you as soon as we can with all the answers. So just from my side, my name's David. I'm part of the relationship team at the IoD. And it's wonderful to see so many people attending this early start to this morning. This is one of many different events going on throughout the year, as I'm sure you may be aware. If you've had a look at our IoD website recently, you will see that the events continue in terms of webinars, in terms of in-person events, networking, topic-led discussion, panel discussions such as this throughout the UK as well. So we're always happy to have everyone sort of join, as many people join as possible to keep the discourse going. We also have a number of special interest groups. Obviously, this is one of the education group events going on, and we have another coming up in the next few months. We actually have 17 special interest groups in total. So if you'd like to find out more about that, please do visit the website and have a little look through the others that follow the likes of women in business. We have sustainability. We also have property and built environment and finance and fintech, to name just a few. So we also, through this event, are able to provide a discount on one's first year of membership. If anyone here doesn't happen to be a member of the IoD just yet, there is a discount available. If you'd like to find out more about this discount or any other information about IoD membership, please do visit memberrelations@iod.com. I've just put this into the chat as we conclude. But if you would like any more information, that is the email address to go for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, and a massive thank you to our speakers. So Alex, Robert, Jane, Paul, Faye, and Simon. Some brilliant insight, a lot of questions still to be answered. So I hope to see a lot of you on something similar in the very near future. And thank you to Dean as well for helping me get this organised. But a fabulous start to the day, lots of food for thought. Thank you all. Enjoy what looks like it's going to be quite a pleasant day, and see you all soon. Thank you very much.